order. This is the October 7th City Council of the City of Escalon regular meeting. Would you please join me in the salute to our flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Merkin?
Here.
Councilmember Kremick?
Here.
Councilmember Legero?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Alves?
Here.
And Mayor Swift?
Here. Okay, and we would like to start this evening with a presentation. And Tammy, I'm going to let you do the introductions.
Tonight, we are presenting a proclamation for the October as the Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we have Krista Feisner, who's here tonight with the Women's Center.
Fantastic. I'd like to take this opportunity to go ahead and read the proclamation while I have a microphone in front of me, if you don't mind. So, whereas the problem of domestic violence is not confined to any group or groups of people, but crosses all economic, racial, gender, educational, religious, and societal barriers, and is sustained by societal indifference, and whereas when a family member is abused, it can have a long-term damaging effect on the victim that also leave mark on family, friends, and the community at large. And whereas domestic violence is widespread and is devastating to society as a whole, but particularly women and children. And whereas 1 in every 4 and women and 1 in every 9 men experience domestic violence, where 19% of intimate partner violence involves a weapon, and 1 in every 15 children are exposed to domestic violence in the United States. And whereas during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we recommit ourselves to ending violence within our homes, our communities, and our countries. And whereas to effectively respond to domestic violence, we must provide supportive services that meet the immediate needs of victims, including safe shelter and housing, medical care, access to justice, culturally specific services, and economic opportunity, so that they can escape the cycle of abuse. And whereas Women's Center Youth and Family Services has led the way in the City of Escalon in addressing domestic violence by providing 24-hour helpline services to victims and survivors, responding to emergency calls, and empowering those impacted by domestic violence to chart their own course for healing. And whereas staff and volunteers of Women's Center Youth and Family Services vow to work year-round to encourage every person in the City of Escalon to end domestic violence by providing young people with education about healthy relationships, changing attitudes that support violence, and creating a future where all women, men, and children can live free from violence and exploitation. Now, therefore, in recognition of the important work done by domestic violence programs and the victims' service providers, I, Robert Swift, Mayor of Escalon, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2019 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and urge all citizens to dedicate themselves to break the cycle of violence. Chris, I'd like to give this to you right now, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for doing everything you do. This is very important endeavor.
I'm a resident here, so I'm really grateful for all of your guys' support.
If you like to say something, please do so. This is your opportunity.
I would just like to say thank you for your support. As the CEO of Women's Center Youth and Family Services, I'm also a resident here, and we're really grateful. We know a few months ago there was an incident that happened related to domestic violence. It actually happened very close to our home, and our children were able to hear part of the incident that happened. And so while it does not happen in our homes, it does happen in our communities, and we all know about it. We go to, my kids go to school with kids and whatnot. And so we are really grateful for all of your support, and we will be hosting in Stockton, but a candlelight vigil on Thursday, October 24th, I believe, to honor the victims of our county that have lost their lives as a result of domestic violence. So we invite you to join us if you're able to, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I may add that I would imagine that just about everybody in this room, you probably don't have to go too far between family or friends or people that you know that have been affected by domestic violence too. So unfortunately, it's not uncommon, and that's what I seem to be often reading in the chief's police reports every month. Some of the most serious incidents have to do, time and again, domestic violence.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
So thank you for your support.
Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. These items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by a single action unless requested by an individual council member or member of the public for special consideration. For example, regarding item number 2, I will be abstaining on voting on check number 9669.
I move to approve.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Consent calendar passes 5-0. Staff communications.
So Mayor and Council, I wanted to update you. Last meeting, we discussed the potential of the local tax revenue survey, and staff did put one out on the Survey Monkey. We shared it on our Facebook page and on our website, and I do have the results from that. And basically, I will caution you that we don't know. We got 128 responses. I don't know that all of those are technically within city limits or voter or registered voters, but it did come out to about 69% said, indicating they would either definitely vote yes or probably vote yes. 29% said they would vote no, and then there was a 2.3% that was unsure on it. Several comments that were made in the survey were, as long as it's police only, making sure that we're maintaining our force, that we're not going to collect the revenues and divert what we currently put to the police someplace else. So making sure that we're keeping our staffing and enhancing that, and ensuring that staffing for those economic downturns. Some asked for more information, confirming that it was going to be for safety personnel. I did also reach out to a polling company, and they had recently polled Orange Cove, which was a smaller municipality, about 9,000 in population. And it's kind of amazing that out of about 4,000 voters, they're only anticipating they would contact like 80 to 100 based on their experience in Orange Cove. And the cost on that polling would be about $10,500.
That's not very effective.
So, I think, if whatever council chooses to do, if you were to choose to move forward on it, I think that, getting out there and putting a fact sheet out, that gave people more information than what our survey did, obviously. We were out there trying to get a taste to see if it's even gonna be accepted in the community. But I just wanted to bring that information back to you, and I can answer any questions that you might have on that.
Well, we certainly will not be alone, because at the last COG meeting I went to, San Joaquin County is talking about raising the county-wide sales tax.
Oh, wow.
And Tuolumne County and Sonora are also doing the same thing. And Sonora is dedicating theirs to public safety too. And my only concern is that we do get the information out, we do guarantee that this is for public safety, and not do like the governor's done with the gas tax.
Yeah, I think anything like that would have to be paramount, that we'd have to make it clear that, the mechanism by which we can guarantee that these monies are gonna go towards the intended purposes, which is keeping public safety, either the staffing levels up during a recession or keeping that well fortified while everything else is invariably gonna be going down because of the economy. So, where we're at, the one polling company that you talked to, not doesn't sound like you were very impressed with them, and the
Well,
results aren't very impressive either.
No,
so.
I honestly think that that is just the nature of polling at this point, because recently, City of Manteca, as a matter of fact, was talking about doing polling. And in their city, they were anticipating that they would be able to reach 400 people. So it's, you know, because in today's society, we all get all of those spam phone calls. So you have to have somebody that actually answers the phone. And, you know, I'm one that if I don't know the number, then I don't necessarily pick it up. If they want to talk to me, they can leave me a message, and then I'll decide if I call them back. And I think that's the biggest struggle probably that those polling companies go through, that to make several outreaches to get that contact.
Well, we have a mechanism to pretty much inform the majority of people in this community, and that is the water bill. And if we really want to get a good feel for what we're doing, just drop a little note into everybody in the water bill, telling them exactly what we want to do, how it works, and I think at the end of that, if you didn't get any impact either way, it is what it is. But I think that is the easiest way and the most sound way to do it. It doesn't cost us anything to put a little note in there. Tell them, hey, look, we're considering raising the sales tax, here's what we want to raise it for, here's how much we're gonna hope to get, and boom. I think that's the easiest way to get your feedback in a more accurate manner.
Yeah. Timing-wise, when you're looking at the next water bill coming out,
November 1st.
November 1st?
How many houses does that go to? How many people, like, I'm on,
22 Close to 22, approximately 2,200 homes
That's
and
a lot better
businesses.
Yeah.
but then you would need everybody to
But then you need to
respond.
get them to respond, correct?
Well, the bottom
And I don't know how many people technically read the newsletter. I mean, I know that there's a select few that do, but honestly, I don't know how many do.
Well, you know, we had a situation this month where the newsletter, there was a bit of a snafu with the newsletter, and
Right.
the copies were out here, okay, instead, how many people picked up a
You know what
copy?
I'm saying?
We got rid of one stack that was out there of the three.
Yeah.
And
Now granted, they had to go through the extra effort to grab it, to get the copy, you
we
know,
have them
but-
at the counter too, yeah,
yeah.
we've been handing
But
them.
still, they had to come here to get it
Correct,
versus, you know.
yes, yeah.
The thing about putting the water bill is that they may or may not read it, but at least we gave them an opportunity, so when we vote what we vote, they really haven't got a lot of room to complain. I just like to cover myself. I just think it's a better way to deal with it.
And I think that if that goes on the water bill, then November 1st, looking at that timeline that Ann was talking about at the last meeting, that would cut it close, because we would have to do that declaration on the meeting of the second meeting in November.
Correct.
That's about your one shot. So,
Yeah, which
you
I
know.
believe,
We need 5
Yeah.
votes.
yeah. So the other thing is, you know, if you do that, you would be kind of pretty tight, you know, but, you know, like I say, if that might give us some kind of an indicator. I don't know if it's any more accurate than a Survey Monkey. Definitely a lot cheaper than spending $10,000 at this point.
well, I mean, I think if we put it in the newsletter, we'd have to give them somewhere to go to respond. So my only thought would be that we would just refer them to the Survey Monkey, but then you gotta give them a link to that in the newsletter. So, or we set up an email that they could send to.
Let me ask you this, do they mail back in the water bill?
Some do, some don't.
Well, the ones that do are the ones I want to hear from anyway. So why don't we put a little slip in there for them to send back with their water bill, rather than worry about the monkey thing and all the rest of that stuff? And just basically, what we try to do is make an effort to give everyone the fair chance to have an opinion. They either fill it out or they don't. It's put it back in the bill, it's not complicated. If they don't do it, they don't do it, but we made the effort and a fair effort, and it's an easy response. And it's more accurate, by the way, probably too.
You know, and after the water bill, what would we be looking at cost-wise to actually put something like this on the March ballot? Because
I
our best indicator is an actual vote.
Right.
You know.
So cost-wise, it depends upon what avenue the council wants to go. If you want to enlist the help of public relations to get the story out, then there could be that potential cost, and I don't know, what those costs might be at this time, and then you're gonna have election cost. So you're gonna have to pay the county for this measure being on there. And I would say you're probably looking at $8,000 to $10,000 for that.
Now, that would be regardless of March or November,
Correct,
right?
yes.
Okay, all right.
November, it would be, you're still gonna have to pay. I mean, in the November one, it may be a little consolidated because you have, the terms for council, that would be on there also. So,
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that no matter if, regardless, if the results seem halfway decent off that, you know, that monthly newsletter, and again, I don't know if that's any more scientific than a survey monkey, because a lot of the people, the bills, you know, they pay the bills automatically, so they'll never even read that letter, but hopefully they do.
sure.
And so at some point, the rubber's gotta meet the road, and we have to commit, if we want to commit to this as the option, or an option to safeguard public safety. Then at that point, then we've gotta eventually say, okay, we're gonna be committing to put it on the ballot. And I think that even after the monthly newsletter thing, I've got a feeling we'll probably be right back in the same spot where we're at now, going, well, we had 6 respondents, and 7 of them said Newsom doesn't need any more money, and then, you know, or who knows what kind of craziness we're gonna get. You know, that's.
Well,
their-
and there's also a public hearing required. After, you know, you'll adopt the resolution and introduce the ordinance, and at that same time, schedule a public hearing, and it has to be noticed. So then, then in 2 weeks, there'll be a public hearing. So that's another place where people can comment. You know, you're not locked in at that point, but.
Right. So if we vet the newsletter at the beginning of November, and then it still boils down to that second meeting would have to be the public hearing meeting as well, correct?
Well, then, you have to, December 6th is the deadline for them to, but do they have to pass the ordinance before then? Okay, so yeah, that would need to be your public hearing then.
Yeah, okay. So that'd be the shot. And you know, you never know. And if there's not enough time for then maybe you are looking at the November, you know, budget, but isn't it, the November ballot, which isn't as palatable, because you're probably gonna be going against a, you know, a bond there too, from the school district. So, or worst comes worse, you know, you wait till 2022, you know, so. And I think in all these options, you know, again, I think the bottom line is whatever we do, and the reason this whole thing gets brought up is because you try to look ahead. A lot of the things we're doing right now as a council is looking ahead. I think we're gonna be talking about an RFP letter later on tonight. And all has to do with looking ahead, planning for the future. You see what's gonna be happening down the road, prepare for it, you know, while we still can, while we got plenty of time to do it. So, is consensus at this point to put it in the newsletter?
Yes.
It is for me,
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds good.
with a slip to send it back.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Gary Haskin, 471 Cabernet Court. I don't know how much money you want to spend on this survey, but if you had a separate piece of paper, red, bold print, raise taxes, question mark, do the explanation, and actually have a stamped return envelope in there, I think it'll get your biggest response. It's just you might be talking 2,200 homes, 50 cents roughly is 1,100.
100.
Paper, envelopes, everything else, you might be talking 1,500. Also, Escalon Times would be probably a good place to put it. But that explanation in real distinct lettering
Yeah.
will get someone's attention.
Well,
And then that solves the problem of how do you get that information back to the city?
no, you're right. You want to make it easy on them. Yeah, you want to make it easy on the customer too. Well, I agree. And I think that Mayor Pro Tem Alves has a really good point in terms of, you know, let's vet as much as we can before we go all in on some money. What do you guys feel about the self-addressed stamped envelope option? And again, all I need is a consensus at this point.
I'm good with it.
It's okay? I think I need a consensus because we're going to spend a couple dollars. Now, is that about?
Yeah, because you're probably looking around $1,200 to do that.
Okay. So again, Ann, does that trigger an actionable vote or no? Or are we just looking at consensus
The
still?
consensus is okay.
Okay. So we okay with that?
Consensus.
Self-addressed stamp, yes.
And also the separate piece of paper explaining the tax,
Mm-hmm.
to get their attention in red, bold letters.
Okay. And I'm sure that,
Strike was 470.
Well, you know what, if you get, at this day and age, you get 25% back, you're doing pretty good. Yeah, you know.
The bottom line is you give them a chance. You
Yeah.
know what? We don't want to be accused of trying to be non-transparent. We're doing everything we can to be
Mm-hmm.
transparent. What more can we do? Go to their house, knock on the door and ask them? No. So we do the next best
Mm-hmm.
thing, which is to send out the, like Gary and the rest, we all agree on. It's a reasonable solution to the problem we have.
So are we okay with that? And then I would imagine, Tammy, you'll probably let us know what the wording's gonna be again, you know, just.
Yeah, I'll
might be
have
the
to
same
get
wording.
that up done quick, because we turn in our newsletter like the middle of the month, so.
I mean, was everybody satisfied with the wording on the Survey Monkey?
Yes.
What's that?
Was everybody satisfied with the wording on the Survey Monkey?
What was the wording on the survey monkey?
Go up on that.
I hope you
Right
did,
there.
because you're the one who asked for it.
Including supporting the needed.
I did respond, yes.
But does it mention, I don't see where it mentions where the money's gonna go. It says here, I would support the half-inch sales tax measure, to ensure the training, blah, 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 but it doesn't say the money is gonna be in the budget for the police department. And it doesn't say where the money's going.
Well,
Those are two things I think should be pointed out. So are
I
we putting
I
money
think
in?
that it
In-
does,
In the Escalon Police Department,
That's
that's
not the
your,
budget, that's talking where the money's supposedly going.
including
Right.
supporting the needed training equipment and operating budget in the Escalon Police Department.
Okay, so where's the money gonna go? Is it gonna go in the police department budget, or is it gonna go in the general fund?
the training.
Well, the police department is part of the general fund, so it's gonna go into the police department budget,
So all
but
the
that
mon-
is part of the general fund.
So all the money, I understand that, all the money that's raised on this new increase in tax is gonna be set aside for the police department, yes or no?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the goal,
Yeah,
yes.
that's, yeah.
Every cent.
But the,
And what about the budget money we currently have for the police department? What happens to that money?
That's the council's call. I mean,
yeah, what the idea.
my thought process was that this was to, my understanding from the council was this was to enhance the police department and ensure the staffing levels and training and their equipment is all up to date.
Enhance was a good word, yes, I agree it should enhance, but it should not remove any of the current funding they're getting. That's
Sure.
my question.
Right, no, yeah, no.
Well, and I mean, that's
my thought
council's
too, so, yeah.
choice. I mean, that's your decisions to make on the funding.
I just wanna be clear on it.
Yeah, and that's my thought too, is that basically what it's gonna do, is you're gonna fortify that police department, so that, I mean, because here's the thing, otherwise, you have a downturn, everything gets cut, including police, officers. Well, what also goes down with that? Part of the reason why we realized we need to have 2 more officers is because it was becoming a nightmare to fill out all the training schedules, okay, for that. And so, and as well as a nightmare to spend any time with code enforcement or anything like that. So you fortify it, you've got a good defense now, and the idea is to keep that particular defense, your public safety, your police, Escalon Police Department, back where it's at, regardless of the economic climate, Because unfortunately, crime is one thing that doesn't go down in a recession. Yeah, it does go up, so are we okay with this wording? If we can wrap this up right now, that'd be great, because then Tammy can have direction to go with this. Are we comfortable with this wording in the newsletter with a self-addressed stamp envelope?
Yes.
I'm fine with it.
Okay? Okay. That was a great idea, Gary. Okay, sounds good.
Couple other, go ahead, did you have something?
Oh, I just wanted to, I think we're okay if we have the November 18th meeting and then the December 2nd meeting
Yeah,
to get it to them by the 6th.
okay. I had a feeling we might be able to squeeze into the December meeting. Okay, that's fine, okay,
And that'll be accompanied with a public hearing as well?
Yes.
Perfect.
good.
And I don't know if the council or residents have heard, but the PG&E is putting out there some potential power outages. And there are about 50 services in San Joaquin County that are gonna be affected, but they are in the southern part of Tracy. So nothing for the city of Escalon, and there's still, even that's on the low level of potential power outage there. But I just wanted to let the council know that at this time, we're not expecting any power outage to affect the city of Escalon.
There was a map on Facebook that showed where it is. It's South
Yeah,
Ripon.
if you go to the next one, yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
go down some.
Go down, there it is.
Yeah, so the grayed area is the county, and you can see just on the tip there of Tracy. It's the southern part of Tracy there.
Okay.
And then, I just wanted to let the council know too, that staff is talking with, a couple of the internet providers for Wi-Fi in our Main Street Park and at Hogan in the Community Center Park. There would be an agreement which would allow them some installation of repeaters throughout the city. But actually, our local provider and then one from Modesto is, gonna present offers to us.
Good. Mhm.
And that is all I have for staff communications. I don't know if anybody else has anything.
Dominique, Chief, Justin?
Just give you an update on Lear Village. They're setting up forms for
Excuse
sidewalks.
me, just a second, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
just on the Lear Village project, they're working on sidewalks right now, and they're supposed to be inspected tomorrow, and then the sidewalks will go in. So hopefully that will be moving forward, and then after that, we should see
Mhm.
Real progress.
some more progress, yeah.
Yeah, good. I hear a lot more noise, and you can see
Yeah.
through the cracks. And it's almost like a good thing that they have little cracks in the fence where you can see. It was, oh, I
Yeah.
see people in there. I see people doing things in there. Yeah, that's
As soon
good.
as the sidewalk's done, I'm pushing the fence behind the sidewalk, too.
Yeah, we have gotten a couple
Thank
of
you.
calls
Now-
regarding that because of the vision. And so right now, it's out more than it would typically be because he's setting form and getting prepared. But as soon as that's done, he's gonna have to push him back in.
How
again.
about on Coley? Is he gonna be pouring the sidewalk there, and will those fences be moved back behind the sidewalk?
All of the fences
All
will
of
be
it.
pushed.
That's,
back.
okay, and I'm thinking about the post office, 'cause that's been a real bugaboo.
Yeah.
So that's good, okay, good.
But I would anticipate, once they start construction though, those may have to go back
Might go
out.
back out,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just saying, because that
PRYC
building
may
sits
wanna
close to
figure
the
something out.
sidewalk,
It'll
so,
be a while.
Yeah,
yeah.
oh boy,
Constitution can.
yeah.
We will encourage not, but can't make a guarantee.
Might be, from a PR standpoint, it might be a very wise move from to keep the street open, so. Is there anything else regarding staff communications? No, then we will jump to, you do? You have something? Oh. Matters presented to the audience. At this time, the public may address the city council on any item not on the agenda. That is within the authority of the council. The speaker is limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. Unused time may not be yielded to another speaker. The determination of whether an item is within the authority of the council is a discretionary decision made by the mayor. And again, we cannot do anything on anything that is not within our purview. However, I will make an exception tonight if somebody knows the score of the Niner game at this point. So, if anybody would like to come up and speak, this is your opportunity. Please do so. I think I have a bunch of Raider fans in here.
I was gonna check the Niners score, but now I'm.
Niners.
Huh?
28-3 Niners.
I know.
Third quarter.
Thank you.
Almost over.
Lovely. Hmm?
Browns couldn't win.
Much
Russell.
more important than what I have to say. Russell
No, no,
Fowler,
no.
Office of Assembly Member Heath Flora. Good to be here with you tonight. Enjoyed being in the community on Sunday. Had a ribbon cutting for a small business, so that was nice. See the community expanding a little bit and supporting businesses is always good. Just as I know, I updated you last time, we're still waiting on those 3 bills sitting on the governor's desk, so as soon as they're signed, I'll let you know, and we can all have a party. And so we
Fantastic.
look forward to that. And my last thing is just looking forward to being in the Scottish Games this weekend coming up. And I encourage you to all come out. You may see me in a kilt. So, if that's not reason enough to come out, I don't know what is. But yeah, so looking forward to that. Normally I stay for the whole meeting, but got a grandma who just had knee replacements, so I'm going to get back to her and take care of her. I'll watch you all on YouTube. But
Fantastic.
with that being said, is there any comments or questions for me?
No, other than thanks again for supporting our community and other local business and the ribbon cutting yesterday. Thank you very much.
Proud to represent Escalon, so I will see you guys soon. See you this weekend.
Better wear that kilt.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I'll have one.
going.
I'll have one custom made with the California colors. How about that?
Make sure you have your belt on.
I'll have my knife and my sock too. You know, can't forget about that part. All right.
Hear that, chief?
Yeah, get me busted.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very
Good to
much,
see you
Russell.
as well.
Thank you,
That's
Russell.
an image in my mind I'll never forget, huh?
That's a nod.
Okay, again, this is your opportunity. If you have something that you'd like to bring up that's not already on the agenda, please do so. If not, we'll be going once.
I'll do it.
Yep, okay.
All right, everyone. My name's Katie, and I'm from Congressman Harder's office. Just have some new things for you. First off is the Congressman's legislative priorities flyer. This is what we made during our August recess to let you all know what is important to the congressman. So I will start over here.
Thank you very much.
So as you all know, there was a very crazy week just a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure you heard all about Ukraine and everything else. And while the entire world was going crazy, our congressman was actually working and was not letting the world and everything that was going on distract him from what his true job is, which is to represent the district and be working on behalf of the district. So while everyone was focused on that, he was actually in a hearing for his Nutria bill, where he brought a stuffed Nutria to talk about the issues of California and Nutria. If no one knows what that is, if you've ever seen Princess Bride, it is a rodent of unusual size. It is very scary looking and disgusting.
Very invasive.
Yes, and so he had a hearing on it. It's looking very positive. We're looking to see that bill probably likely pass. We actually have support from Fish and Wildlife on this, as well as the Trump administration, and they would like to partner with us on getting rid of nutria in other areas that are where they're an invasive species. So we're really excited about that, and wanted to make sure that you know that. The other thing that we're very excited about is that he just introduced a bipartisan bill to kind of fix the doctor shortage in the Central Valley. As you all know, one of the major issues here with healthcare is the fact that we do not have enough doctors in the area. Anytime we go anywhere, even when you talk with the VA, it's the same thing. We don't have enough doctors. So there is actually this issue where federal regulations make it impossible for doctors to work in California and Texas to get their student loans forgiven. So in order to entice doctors to these rural areas of California and Texas, they created a bill, and on it is Representative Paul Cook, Joaquin Castro, Dan Crenshaw, and Karen Bass. Two of those are actually Texas Republicans. And basically what it does is it basically closes that loophole and allows doctors who work in rural hospitals to actually get their student loans forgiven. And the idea is to entice doctors here. The California Medical Association estimates that the bill could bring in about 10,000 physicians to the state over the next decade. That bill is looking like it's likely to pass as well. His water bill actually had a committee hearing. It was one of his first bills, and that bill is also looking like it's likely to pass. The last thing I just wanted to mention is that he has a town hall in Manteca on Thursday, October 10th from 7 to 8 p.m. at Manteca High School's cafeteria. So that's 450 East Yosemite Ave in Manteca. And that's it.
Very good.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
On this forgiving of these doctors' debt, how much is that gonna be, do you know?
We are not sure, but the idea is to forgive all student debt of the doctors as long as they work.
I'm just curious what the amount would be and who's paying for it, where's it coming from?
I am not 100% sure. What I can do is check with our ledge team and get that for you.
It'd be nice to know how much and where it's coming from.
Okay, I will pass that on to our ledge team, and then, Tammy, can I just email you? Okay, and I'll email it to Tammy for you guys.
Fine, thank you.
Katie, I appreciate you coming by tonight, and
Yes, thank
please,
you.
just like Russell, every meeting, like I say, the more that we hear what our representatives are doing, the better for us and the better line of communication that we'll have with them as well. And so thanks again very much for coming.
Yeah, and if anyone doesn't have my card, let me know. I'm more than willing to pass it out. You can always call me, you can email me. If there's something that is a concern to you, please bring it up to me, and I will try and, get something for you. So,
Fantastic.
yeah, and I will also be at the Scottish Games, hopefully. I have to work, so I will be there late.
Okay, as long as you're there, as long as you're there. Thanks again, Katie, appreciate it very much. Okay, anybody else, or we will be moving on to administrative matters? Going once, going twice, administrative matters. Let's see, item number 6. This is a resolution authorizing workman's compensation coverage for off-duty peace officers injured out of state. And who's going to handle this one? I think, Chief?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Council, Mayor and Council, before you is a staff report concerning this item. In 2018, the Assembly amended the California Labor Code that would allow a peace officer employer to accept liability for workman's compensation if that officer was injured out of state and not under the immediate direction of his or her employer. Basically, it dealt with the attempted apprehension of law violators or suspected law violators or protection of or preservation of life, property. And this would take place when the employer determined that providing compensation serves the public purpose of the employer. And as noted in the staff report, the catalyst for this amendment was basically the shooting on October 1st in Las Vegas at a concert where there were off-duty law enforcement officers there from out of state that took action to assist in that, and some of them receiving injuries. Our city workers' compensation carrier has amended the memorandum of coverage that under these circumstances, this could take place, but it would only take place if prior to the occurrence, the governing board of the covered member, i.e. the council, adopted a resolution accepting liability for such injury or illness. Further, I wanted to point out that under our own policy manual in section 386, which is on the second page, it addresses off-duty law enforcement actions. And the policy is outlined there for you. It generally discourages it. So you should attempt to not initiate enforcement action when witnessing minor crimes. You should promptly report appropriate law enforcement agency. You're not expected to place yourself in unreasonable peril. However, any sworn member of this department who becomes aware of an incident or circumstance that he or she reasonably believes poses a threat of serious bodily injury or death or significant property damage may take reasonable actions to minimize the threat. And it would be the expectation that this would take place in those extreme circumstances where our personnel would intercede or when the purpose of preservation and the protection of persons in imminent threat or serious bodily injury is when we would apply this.
What does that do to our cost of doing insurance on this thing? How much does it go up?
It would be anything, I think, would add to our workman's compensation as any other injury would.
But I mean the premium.
So the way that our workers' compensation works is it's not a set premium. It goes based on your experience of
How many
losses.
incidents you had.
Mm-hmm, correct.
So if there was an incident, our rates could possibly go up. Okay.
Correct,
And just like
yes.
if it was an incident on duty here.
Right.
And then again, this is only in relationship to the duties they perform as officers.
Correct.
So in other words, if they're at their uncle's house in Nevada cutting firewood and they whack their arm off, we're not paying for that.
That's when city manager first brought this to my attention, that was one of my first things. Well, I'm not gonna pay for some guy who's out jogging in Reno and he gets hurt. But then, as she pointed out, no, this is related to actual involvement in an issue,
And if that's where it's gonna stay, that's fine.
But who has the final decision on that?
I think it would be the workman's comp carrier. I mean, this would allow us to cover somebody, but like in any other injury, it's always, even when we are injured on duty here, it's still up to our workman's comp carrier whether or not they're gonna cover that as workman's comp or not. You apply and then you have to go through.
But so it's not necessarily limited to extreme circumstances like officers that that responded to New York to assist with after 9/11, right? It could be somebody going to Reno for their kid's tournament and then trying to arrest a shoplifter and getting injured.
No.
So it's not
It would be an extreme situation such as like the Las Vegas where you're in an active
So that
shooter
is
kind of.
more of a catastrophic.
And that's where
Yes.
I believe it, and I believe it also would allow this body, the way it's written, to kind of set those parameters, if that's what you're looking for, is a preservation.
Unless that shoplifter was threatening the lives
Right.
of others, there could be some consideration for
Yeah.
that. But for a generalized shoplifting, no, that's not gonna be a coverage.
So is the actual language with our carrier a little tighter than this? More specific as to what they're gonna cover? Because, you know, if an officer decides they're gonna get involved in something, you know, out of state, thinking that, hey, I'm potentially covered here, and then they're not, we're creating an area ripe for litigation and fight over that.
So I think part of our policy manual protects us from that. That chief included in the staff report where, you know, initiating law enforcement action off duty is generally discouraged, and not for minor crimes, but more
It just
so.
seems very discretionary.
And that would, in that essence, that, in taking the example you just said, that would basically, they would be, in essence, without any other circumstances, trying to apprehend a shoplifter. It was simply a shoplifter and they were injured somehow, they would actually be technically outside of policy.
I think the concept is good, I just think that it's,
You're afraid of the abuse, and I understand.
well, that or, you know, something that you think would be covered and it's not, because the decision-making is too discretionary. You know, they can just deny, and it probably would be appropriate.
My thinking on this is that it's, if there's, you know, minor crimes going on, like I've intervened on somebody breaking into a car before and chased them, and I never thought if I get hurt, am I covered in any way? And you know, if like something like 9/11 happens, there was, you know, lots and lots of non-police officers that were doing, you know, risking their lives for different things. And to me, it seems a little, I don't know if, I think people, because we're talking about really extreme situations where there's an active shooter or something going on, and I don't know if, you know, I guess my personal feeling is that it sounds really kind of gray area, like Councilman Legero was saying, and it seems like officers should be covered when they're, you know, on duty in their area where they're serving. Is kind of how I'm thinking about this.
Well, my guess is that there's probably going to be a fairly high bar. I mean, you basically are talking about workman's compensation, investigating a situation. Was this absolutely necessary for this off-duty officer to do it? And they are ultimately an insurance company, and insurance companies really don't like to be playing fast and loose with giving out money.
And as I stated, in my experience with workman's comp claims, they're not automatically always accepted.
No.
You know, there are many that are not accepted, even in the line of duty.
Well, having worked with the RMA before, I know if we have an incident, they will send an investigator out. They will look at this thing upside down and every other way and determine if that officer was, you know, responding to what it is outlined in here, whether it was needed or whether he just took it upon himself. And then they will make the determination whether they pay or not.
Do you know any other examples of other cities that, you guys know, what are the other policies of is this typical where officers are covered if they're off duty and out of their area?
It was actually the city manager who brought it back from her recent
Yes.
meeting.
Yeah, with the Risk Management Association. And I don't think that there's been a whole lot of incidents where this has happened and there was coverage. I think that, again, the Las Vegas issue brought up a lot of that because there were off-duty officers that were there that ended up assisting. Some got injured and workers' comp would cover them because it's not something that's typically in a workers' compensation policy.
And that's my same thinking, is that incident that happened, there was lots and lots of people that assisted and got shot that were not off-duty police officers, that were not covered in their sort of policy. And I just don't find that, I don't see how that jives when both people are trying to do the same thing. I just don't know.
Well, I would imagine that the idea behind it is that you're a peace officer, you've been trained, you have what you would make the assumptions that, a fairly unique set of skills versus the general population. So if you have an incident like that, like the Las Vegas shootings, or any shooting for that matter, for example, that you have those abilities, you have that skill set by which you can actually make a positive difference, hopefully.
I have a question.
know.
Given the fact that we're gonna cover the comp, if we do cover the comp, which I have no issue with that, I think you'd add some incentive to a police officer in a situation, gives them a little comfort knowing that if something goes wrong, you might have some coverage. But more importantly, do we assume the liability now? If he accidentally shoots some people, are we now stuck with the liability of that? Because now we've said, he is our man.
To answer that question, even if you don't do this, you have an off-duty police officer that goes out there and, whether in the state or out of the state, ends up shooting somebody and he's employed by you,
You're on the hook.
you're gonna be
You're on the hook.
looked at no matter what. It doesn't matter.
You're on the hook anyway.
Because of the fact that he's employed and the deep pocket is,
Even though you
His
have that
employer.
contrary in the code, they're still gonna be looking at the city, just because it's a deep pocket.
I'm trying to boil that down into, there's a lot of things there, because if he's found outside of the scope of his
Yeah.
employment,
Sure.
then basically, the city would not be liable for his actions if he was outside of policy.
Right.
Right, that's right.
Okay. Again, I'll remind the council that this is an actionable item, and in order for it to be approved, that we would authorize the workman's comp coverage, we would need a motion for it.
And our RMA supports this,
Correct.
okay?
I think that another thing maybe I didn't think about is if an off-duty officer is carrying, if they have their concealed carry and they're doing that, because there's this one, I watched this thing on, it's called Active Self-Defense, I think, and it almost every video talks about, shooter situations, and almost everyone is from Brazil, which is interesting. And almost every guy or person that saves the day is an off-duty police officer that's carrying a gun and they're able to stop something. So I think, right, everybody's got guns. So with that being said, I would, I don't know, it's a tough one, but I think that I would probably vote to approve. It doesn't sound like it'll be a huge money issue, and there'll be a big investigation if anything does happen, and so I would make a motion to approve, yeah.
Second that.
Motion's been moved and seconded to approve the attached resolution of this item to authorize workman's compensation coverage for off-duty peace officers injured out of state. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Item number 7. Council consider issuing a request for proposals on infrastructure modernization in utility savings program. Tammy?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor and council, before you tonight, staff is asking you to consider allowing us to issue a request for proposal. We're aware of projects that the city would like to move forward with, and in an effort to ensure that we move forward in an efficient manner, we are requesting that the city council authorize the release of the attached request for proposal, an RFP, to obtain the assistance of a qualified provider. Utilizing the RFP process, the city intends to select a qualified provider for the development, implementation, and monitoring of a comprehensive infrastructure modernization and utility saving program. The city would intend to implement a design-build program consistent with the provisions of the California Government Code Sections 4217.10 through 18 that will provide sustained efficiencies and energy cost savings. The city, at its sole discretion, may select the awarded respondent for subsequent phases of the work and also reserves the right to reject any or all bidders. The ultimate goal is to utilize financial savings realized from more efficient facilities and infrastructure towards other upgrades and programs that enhance the working environment and improve livability. The provider will support the city's goals by developing, implementing, and monitoring an infrastructure modernization and utility saving program that accomplishes the following: achieves long-term cost savings through reduced energy, gas, and water usage, upgrades antiquated and inefficient equipment, provides a comfortable and safe working environment, maintains building functionability and compatibility with existing equipment, improves utilization of technology to achieve optimum performance and savings, minimizes financial and technical risks to the city, provides training to employees on maintenance and repair of equipment and controls, provides comprehensive funding solutions. Upon award, the selected respondent will be required to perform site assessments at each of the city's facilities to evaluate infrastructure improvements in order to develop a scope of work tailored for its needs. Specifically, the awarded respondent will evaluate and propose applicable conservation measures, including but not limited to heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, retrofit, upgrade, or replacement, specifically at our police station and library, sewer and storm system improvements, including lift station pumps and controls and pipe system monitoring technology, LED lighting system for all buildings, parks, well security lighting and street lights, building automation systems, installation, upgrade or expansion, HVAC, sport and street lighting, irrigation with leak detection technology and water meters, water well modernization and security, solar and other renewable technology, battery energy storage, advanced meter reading, which would upgrade meters citywide, and other related infrastructure improvements, or training, remote monitoring services, and ongoing support services that will ensure objectives of the program are met over the term of the agreement. The selected provider will then implement an agreed-upon and council-approved scope of work. All proposed infrastructure improvements must be provided on a turnkey basis, including all necessary permits, engineering, delivery, installation, commissioning, training, warranty service, and compliance with any applicable funding programs. After the scope of work has been fully implemented, the selected respondent will be required to provide measurement and verification services to monitor post-retro utility usage and track energy savings. So, with all of that mouthful, staff is available to answer any questions, or
You must
address.
have some certain things in mind.
We do. Specifically, the police department and the library HVAC. The library has 7 units, and we have really been struggling with all of those recently. And this process was introduced to staff and a couple of council members quite a few months ago, over a year and a half ago, where you go out and they will actually evaluate solar side of it too. So they could use the solar side of it, use the savings from solar to offset the cost of some of these others. The water meters has been part of our desire to go with the automated meter system. Another thing that staff-wise, we just haven't been able to put together that RFP and get it out there. We've met with some companies, we have some good ideas of the direction we want to go, but we just haven't been able to implement that. So this is a measure that would basically enlist the service of a consultant to come in, evaluate all of our systems, and assist us in choosing what direction would be the best for the city to go.
Is this going to cost us anything up front for this consultant?
So their proposals will include that, but my understanding is most of them, the way that they do it, it does not cost you up front.
Okay, it would cost you if you proceed with the project?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Would we know what the cost would be?
So they would put together, the proposal, and I would speculate that depending upon the scope of services, that would determine what kind of cost there would be associated. And we can require them to include that,
I think it's important.
yes.
Another nice thing about actually funding possibilities for some of these. Now, I know some of these projects we've been talking about since 2015. I'll give you an example of the water meters, which was
Right.
part of the original water rate increase package from 2015. And so probably be a really good idea to get the rubber to meet the road
Right.
on that one sometime real soon. Because we have, it hasn't happened yet. And I know a lot of that money's already been now saved up.
Correct.
Granted, you still have inflation, but still, a lot of that money's been saved up. So, and again, this is another motionable item. It's just to head out and let's see what we can do. And again, this is another item that I'm talking about in terms of looking at the future and modernizing a lot of these systems for the next 20, 30 years.
So what we'd be voting on is the opportunity to go out to an RFP, but not
Yes.
committing until we
Correct.
see it and whether or not we like it yet.
Correct.
Absolutely.
That's
Okay,
it,
good.
that's it.
All right.
Okay?
I'd make a motion?
Go for it.
Make a motion to approve the request for proposal.
I'll second.
Motion's been moved and seconded to issue a request for proposal on infrastructure modernization and utility savings program. Is there any discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. And on to item number 8. Council considers approving the acceptance of road base in lieu of business advertisement. Who gets that one?
Me.
Yeah, Tammy, okay.
So the city's been approached by California Materials Incorporated offering to deliver us 4 20-ton truckloads of road-based rock for the vacant lot at the rear of the police department for RV storage. In exchange for the rock, they've requested that we compensate them via advertisement on the electronic sign. The values of the material are identified at $2,000, and our rates for business advertisement on the electronic sign are 1 month at $125, 3 months at $375, or 6 months at $675. So based on the value of the rock, we would be supplying California Materials 18 months of advertising on our sign. So
Okay.
it is before the council tonight to approve and accept the road base and advertise for California Materials.
Question is, do we want to make that trade?
I'm in favor.
Yes, would you?
We got 2 of them here.
Okay. And any other comments? And again, this is an actual item, so I will need a motion.
I'd move on staff's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded on staff's recommendation to approve the acceptance of road base in lieu of advertising for California Materials Incorporated. Is there any discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. And now we will have a public hearing. And item 9, and let's see, who is going to be getting this one? I've got a feeling it's Dominique.
Yes.
Go for it.
You know I like to bring the long items. So this item before you is an appeal by a project applicant of the Planning Commission's decision to deny approval of a conditional use permit and variance to install a 500-square-foot metal carport structure on the west side yard of the house with no setback requirements. The location is 1498 Genevieve Drive in Escalon. The property owner is Jose Reese. Also living at the location, the current zoning is R1 low-density residential, which is a neighborhood. The findings required are pursuant to Escalon Municipal Code Section 17.56030, which are use permits, and 17.57030 for variances. This project does qualify for a CEQA Class 32 categorical exemption under Section 15332 Infill Development Project. And if the Planning Commission's decision is reversed and the project is approved, a notice of exemption will be filed with the County Clerk Recorder's Office. 1498 Genevieve Drive is Lot 6 of the Sunrise Terrace No. 2 subdivision, developed by Avery and Hayes Incorporated and constructed in December of 1993 as a single-family residential dwelling with a two-car garage. The corner lot is 7,622 square feet with the original house, and also has constructed a 240 square foot attached patio cover that was permitted under a separate permit application. The patio permit states composition shingle roofing as the roofing material, which was most likely constructed to match the home since they were both built at the same time period. A building permit was also issued in 2017 to re-roof the home using composition shingles, and then again in 2018 to install roof-mounted PV solar system. Both permits received completion sign-offs by the city building official. The applicant has submitted a conditional use permit and variance application requesting approval to install a 500 square foot metal carport structure with no side yard setbacks. And there's an attachment A that has the picture. The applicant desires to store a recreational vehicle on the side yard and would like to cover it with the carport. The applicant's RV is approximately 26 feet long and is currently being stored at the city's RV storage area. City staff has discussed this project with the applicant prior to submittal, advising of the city's current code requirements and advising that the application did not meet the city's standards for accessory buildings and setbacks, but they are obviously allowed to apply for a variance to that requirement. So I did list the municipal code's general requirements for accessory buildings, which is section 17.12010. And in accordance with A5, the proposed carport for 1498 Genevieve Drive is over 450 square feet, which requires discretionary approval by the Planning Commission in the form of a conditional use permit. The carport also required a variance application to obtain approvals on requirements A, number 2, 3, 4, and E, as the proposed carport does not meet the city's setback requirements of 5 feet between the property line and the detached structure, and 5 feet between the carport and the home. It is currently being proposed with no setbacks on either side of the carport. So potential concerns of city staff and Planning Commission. Although the applicant has advised that the neighbor on the west side of the property is fine with a metal carport installed against the property line, the city code considers the future impact to the neighborhood and how both the existing and new neighbors might respond towards a structure this size against the shared property line. The city, if you recall, recently amended its municipal code by removing setback requirements on accessory structures 120 square feet or less and limiting the total height to 9 feet. The proposed structure is much taller and over 4 times the square footage that was accepted in this code change. The applicant is also proposing the carport be constructed of metal standing under 15 feet in height. And we're not 100% on what the height is, but the plan shows at 12 feet, but then there is some leeway between there, but our code will stop it at 15 feet tall during construction if approved. It has been a standard practice of city staff to encourage the use of like materials that match or blend in with the surrounding neighborhood, and in this case specifically the primary structure. In multiple discretionary projects, both staff and Planning Commission have viewed metal as an unacceptable material, conditioning the projects that move forward to Planning Commission that they apply a stucco finish over them, especially when the structure is visible to the public. The city's municipal code currently prohibits metal, whether corrugated, bare wire, as well as chain link fiberglass and unfinished plywood, from being used when constructing fences and walls in all of the city's zoning districts. These materials are described as being of poor quality and unattractive pursuant to EMC 17.41.030L. The applicant intends to purchase the metal carport in the colors fox gray for the body and polar white for the trim to match the paint colors of the home and the gate screening the side yard, which is also metal. The gate is approximately 7 feet tall, assuming that the neighbor's wood fence is 6 feet in height and appears to be very well maintained. Another concern discussed at the August Planning Commission meeting was fire access. The commission was concerned that the fire department may have trouble accessing the back of the house if needed. Staff had responded to this concern by advising that the fire department shared no concerns with the project and that the structure itself would not pose any more of an issue for access than what side yards are commonly used for, as most residents with the side yard utilize them for some sort of storage, including RV parking, when it can fit. The Planning Commission also discussed how many unpermitted metal carports not meeting municipal code requirements were already in town, and agreed then rather than approving a variance on the setback for this specific structure, that the council should consider and make a determination as to whether metal carports should even be allowed in residential neighborhoods and whether they should be subject to the city's setback requirements, and then amend the municipal code to reflect that determination. These concerns led the Planning Commission to denying the project application at the August 13th meeting, and their action thus began a 10-day appeal period in which the applicant filed an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision on August 23rd. For public outreach, a public hearing notice appeared in the Escalon Times newspaper on July 31st, 2019 for the Planning Commission hearing, and on July 30th, the notice was mailed out to every property owner within 300 feet. As noted in the latest assessor's records, staff at that time had received no phone calls resulting from the mailed public hearing notice. The project details were mailed to all applicable local agencies and departments, and any responses received are attached in the staff report or incorporated into the conditions of approval for the project. In accordance with the municipal code, the applicant submitted an appeal within the 10-day appeal period as required. And per the municipal code, the city council shall hear and decide appeals from any action of the Planning Commission and may affirm or reverse action in whole or in part. The city council shall not be limited in its review of that portion of the action complained of, but may consider the entire matter, and in doing so may add, modify, or delete conditions as it deems necessary or proper. City staff provided notice of the time, place, and purpose of the appeal hearing to be held in accordance with the provisions of the municipal code, and did the following: published the notice in the newspaper of general circulation in the city at least 5 days prior to such hearing, and for hearings directly relating to an identifiable property or area, notice was also given by posting at least 3 public notices thereof at least 5 days prior to this hearing on the property and within 300 feet along streets upon which the subject property abuts, and by mailing notice at least 5 days prior to the date of the hearing to the property owners within 300 feet of the streets upon which the subject property abuts, using for this purpose the names and addresses which appear on the latest assessment roll for taxes. And Mr. Reese did assist us with getting that stuff out and having those posted. The findings required by the code: the following findings are required for a use permit and must be based on substantial evidence in view of the whole record. A, that the use is necessary or desirable in relation to the purposes of the Escalon General Plan, this title, and the economic, social, and environmental status of the city. B, that the use will properly be related to other uses, transportation facilities, and other public facilities in the area, and will not cause undue environmental impacts relating to noise, odor, pollution, etc. And C, that the use will not adversely affect the health or safety of persons living or working in the vicinity, or be material detrimental to the public welfare of the city and its residents. The following findings are required for a variance. A, that there are special circumstances applicable to the subject property or to the intended case which do not generally apply to other property in the same vicinity and under identical zone classifications. B, that the special circumstances relate to the property or use, not the financial or other personal condition of the applicant, nor to any self-imposed condition on the property that is the result of actions taken by the present owner or his predecessor. C, that the granting of a variance shall not constitute a grant of special privilege inconsistent with the limitations upon the other property in the vicinity in the same zone classification. And D, that the result would not be detrimental to the public health, safety, welfare, or materially injurious to properties or improvements in the vicinity. Staff has reviewed the comments received from all agencies and put together the following items to serve as the proposed conditions of approval. Staff recommends that the City Council review them pending any modifications they may seek to include and or remove. If the council makes a determination to approve the project application, the following actions must be taken. We need to open the public hearing and take any public testimony on the project, close the hearing and make any closing comments, make the findings as required for use permits, make the findings as required for variances, find the project CEQA Class 32 categorical exemption, and authorize staff to file a notice of exemption, and consider the approval of the conditional use permit and various variance applications with the conditions of approval as proposed below or as modified by the council. So we do have the listing of the conditions of approval. They were updated a few months ago at council's recommendation. We have specified the specific conditions, and then we have listed our standard conditions, which are the standard conditions that go with every project. So the specific conditions would be the approval, that the use permit and the variance runs with the land, and benefits and limitations are binding on subsequent owners, and that the use permit and variance as approved by the city council on this date is approval to construct in the yard a 500 square foot detached accessory metal carport no taller than 15 feet in height with no setback requirements on either side of the structure. Number 2 would be the variance and conditional use permit validity. The use permit and variance are specific to this project and these improvements, and if the owner wanted to modify the approved improvements in any way, need to file for an amendment of or a new application as required to make those modifications. We do have a listing on there for the outdoor storage in accordance with Municipal Code 17.41090, that the area for outdoor storage must be suitably screened from adjoining property and the public right-of-way by a wall, dense evergreen hedges of trees or other screening or planting, or by a solid fence not less than 6 feet in height. And then PG&E did request to install barrier posts to protect the gas riser on the property. And then the other items, as listed, are standard conditions that go with all the projects and at the council's discretion. And Mr. Reese is available here in the audience if you have any questions.
Are there any opening comments? I would like to hear from Mr. Reese. Right. I'm going to apply, is it Reese or Reyes?
Reese.
Reese.
R-E-I-S.
I hope I
That was
did say
Reese.
that right.
Hi, Mr. Reyes.
Oh.
Or Mr. Reese. Now you have me saying Reyes. Hi.
I don't know. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I don't have really anything to say. I'm here to try to get my building approved to put on the side of my house. The whole reason why I went through this whole process is because I thought I was doing something right. Because you drive around the city of Escalon, you see these metal structures all over the place, and so here I thought I was doing something right, and come to find out that metal structure wasn't the proper way the proper building to put up. So, like I said, I'm just here to see if I can get this thing approved, just so I can have a place to store my trailer and the boat in the side yard and try to utilize that spot.
Yeah, well, what I'm trying to digest, and maybe Dominique, you can answer this question. Very detailed planned. You have a very detailed plan. And I know that the tendency of the staff, as well as the planning commission, see if there's any way to make something work, they're gonna do it. Okay, they're pretty reasonable in that sense. So what I'm trying to figure out is, what, did the planning commission really feel like this was a little bit too much of a stretch to approve? Or did they really feel that, boy, we're really gonna be wide open by approving this with so many other, like Mr. Reese said, so many other metal structures in town? I mean, where's the real disconnect? What happened?
It's my understanding, and when I've discussed with my staff from the meeting and putting the staff together, the staff report together, that it's a combination of everything. Not only is it a substantially large metal carport, it's 500 square feet, and the 450 is where we require planning commission discretion. It's also going to be placed right along the building and up to the property line. And also with those type of structures, trying to get them to meet setback requirements, make them unusable because of the way they're constructed. You can't attach them properly to a house, and so that hasn't worked out for people who have been interested in doing that, as well as when you have them meet that 5-foot setback requirement, where we typically would say the posts are at the 5 feet, and then it has to come within the 3 feet for building code requirement. It takes away that space where you can't fit your structure in them anyway, so it makes them pointless to install at that point. We haven't had anybody apply for a permit for those in some time. Our feeling when talking with people who are interested in putting in those types of structures is that they are considered temporary because they're not, a lot of them aren't physically put into the ground. They're relatively easy to disconnect, which I put a paragraph in there. I must have skipped over it when I was reading, too focused. They're supposed to be easily attachable. You anchor them to the ground, and if you wanted to move them somewhere else, you could move them. So we don't typically get for metal carports, and in the event that people do want to ask to put them in, they never meet the setback requirement, because when they're looking at putting in that carport, they want to use up as much of their side yard as they can. And so at that point, oh, well, then I can't put them up. And that's where we tell them, well, we can suggest that you make it not of metal. That way you're able to attach it to the house, and that buys you that 5 feet off of the house.
Gotcha.
Where you get that extra 5 feet, have it attached to the house, and then, of course, when you're attaching it to the house, you're making it with like materials, and so that's where encouraging like materials with the house would come into play.
And how did you feel about that as an option?
Well, on the side of my house, that's where the peak is, and you're looking at a lot of construction just to put a carport. And besides, even if I did that carport that she's talking about, the posts are still got to be set back off the fence line, and that pretty much defeats the purpose of me getting my trailer back in there. And my trailer, that's where I always kept it for years and years. I've been living there almost 20 years. I just decided to protect my trailer. And from driving around town, like I said, as I see them around, I thought they were okay to have. That's why I went through the proper steps to do what I was doing. And so, if I can't get this type of structure, because this is a pre-engineered carport, it's pretty much the legs that come down the ground. We anchor them down to the ground, and we're done. I don't have to attach it to the fence line. I don't have to attach it to the house. And if I ever want to remove it, I can.
Yeah.
So if I ever decide to sell the property, it's going with me.
Right, but I mean, they're bolted into the ground.
Yeah, you're going to put anchors so they don't blow off
Right,
and
right,
blow out
right.
in the street on a windy day, but
And it would still be behind, I see the metal gate here, you'll still be behind the metal gate?
2 feet.
2 feet. So the issue is, it's a different material other than the house. 5-foot setbacks, it'll violate that, correct?
So
And
the priority issue would be like the setbacks, the size, which is over 450, requires approval. Also, the zero setback requirement on either side, where 5 is required between the structure, the primary structure itself, and the proposed structure, as well as 5 feet from the proposed structure from the property line, or where the fence is typically located. And then in addition, where the Planning Commission was going is that although city staff and Planning Commission encourage materials, and because such type of these projects typically meet a threshold of going to Planning Commission as discretionary, that's where it's come in. Well, we don't want it to be metal, or if you're gonna use metal, it's visible to the public, so we apply a stucco finish. So we've had a lot of commercial properties that have gone through that have to put that stucco finish on it so that it doesn't look like a metal building, trying to make it more appeasing to the eye, or aesthetically more pleasant, I guess you could say. So that's where it came down. Well, we're doing a lot of projects that way. If we're doing them that way, we should look at updating our code that way as well. So in addition to that, the Planning Commission wanted the council to consider whether or not they wanted to put language in the code, update it, to specifically allow for that use, or to specifically not, or for the metal to specifically allow for it,
as
or
long as
not.
it's done similar to what I think Mr. Reese has proposed with the color combination as a
Yeah.
house.
I'm going with the color combination just to match, so it kind of blends into the house. As far as stucco on the building, a pre-engineered building, they're not gonna let me do that. It's gonna void the manufacturer warranty. That's pretty much, the purpose of doing that.
I've seen 2-3 references, Dominique, in the report regarding just what you had just said about, that it seems like the Planning Commission's like, okay, well, goes the setback, okay, it's metal, okay, well, gee, maybe it'd be a better idea to have the council review this. Am I gleaning that okay?
Yes, because typically when it comes to code enforcement, I would say just about all of the ones that I've seen that have been called in on a complaint basis that there's a metal carport, typically new construction. A lot of them don't meet the height requirement of the 15 feet, so we've had a couple built over the years that have been put in that are extremely tall, and so they stick out. That wasn't there before, and that's new. They probably don't have a permit because it's just way too tall. So they call it in. We move forward on investigating the complaint, and typically those types of structures, usually, most people don't pull an actual building permit on them because they think because they're temporary, they don't require a building permit, but they actually do because you want to make sure that they're secured to the ground properly, and attached and put together properly. And then in most cases, like I mentioned before, they don't meet those setback requirements. And so for people that are familiar with the city's regulations, they know right away that doesn't meet
Right.
code. And so we haven't had any since we had one metal carport that was permitted back in 2013, and it was because their lot was substantially larger than a lot of the lots in town, so they were actually able to relocate it to meet setbacks.
Okay.
I have a,
Go ahead.
I have a few comments on this. So I used to live I still live in the neighborhood where Mr. Reese lives, and I think it's important to note out that their house is the nicest house in the neighborhood, and the way they maintain their landscaping, the way they maintain their vehicles, and this would be a project in my mind that would be done right. And I don't think that because it's off the code, it's encouraging. What it is doing is encouraging people to come through the right process, to go through planning commission, and then if that's denied, then to appeal it and to come through all of the different stages. And I think that this is a citizen of the community that we should be proud to have here, and the way they just maintain their property. And so, all that being said, I did go to the planning commission meeting where this was discussed, and I did make comments, and I was advised by our city council, our city attorney that it'd probably be wise for me to abstain since I've already kind of been involved in this. So
Fair enough.
because
I'm sorry, I had forgotten that this was the one. I
Yeah.
apologize for not bringing.
I would, and let me say this though, if I was voting, I would vote to approve this,
Okay.
but I'm gonna abstain.
Okay.
And it would probably be best if you don't mind to step out for the rest of the discussion.
Yeah.
Seriously, yeah.
We do it all the time.
So I'm sorry I didn't remind you.
Spoke too early.
It's not singling you out. I get to go at least twice a year.
awkward. No.
That's okay, just
I
don't
get to go at
say.
least twice a year. Great.
Well, I'd like to comment on Peter's comment. Peter, I think, is right on the money on this thing. This gentleman's house is impeccable. Look at his neighborhood. He's been in there. He's a good example. He's coming down to all the right channels. And as far as the building itself, it's not what I consider ugly. And as far as a fire hazard, it's not, because it's all metal. And yes, it violates the side setbacks, absolutely. But in a parking situation similar to that to anywhere, you're locked in the same situation. You only have X amount of space. If he puts his trailer house in there, or his motorhome, or whatever it is he's putting in there, it's more of a fire hazard than a building. And it's not gonna have the setback anyway. Personally, I know it's a tough call. I know that Planning Commission does their best, and I think that on their call, I just disagree. I think I would let it go.
Well, I'm kind of sort of thinking about it like this, and I understand and I appreciate the planning commission's dilemma, to go this far out from where the code is, and gee, maybe it should be looked at from the council to change the code. So I kind of sort of see it like this. Which comes first, the code change or reversing the decision and allow Mr. Reese to build his port? Now, what I'm thinking about is, and again, I don't know you, but I know where your house is at, and it's, I know you take care of things. This might become a model for exactly how we would want to do an ordinance like this. If we want to change ordinance, this might become the model right here. No pressure, okay? So,
I get a lot of compliments, so I get a lot of people stop and ask me if I could work on their place, and
yeah.
so it's.
So I mean, I'm just seeing if you do, which comes first, reversing that decision, and I think that the planning commission had some very good concerns about which comes first as well, and of course, it was out of their power to change the code.
They're doing
You
their
know,
job.
my thought is maybe you reverse that, and then we go right to work about changing the code to accommodate, because I think there is a certain cadre of homeowners in town that are in similar situations. They have an RV, or they have a boat, they have something they like to take care of. They want to get it off the street. They want to be a good neighbor. They need to have it protected, but unfortunately, within the current code, they really can't do that. And so either they park it on the street, or the vehicle, or the RV, or the boat fades with time, or they cover it, and we know about how much fun those covers are. So this might become the model, I'm hoping, to make some modifications in that ordinance.
I want to add to that too. I've owned a trailer since 2006. I've done the covers. The last few months, they start tearing up because of the wind.
Few months.
And it looks, I mean, they look like crap after a while. And then you finally give up on them, then you let the trailer sit out. So I'm on my second travel trailer. My first one was pretty well weather beat. So all I'm trying to do is protect my stuff and try to keep, like I said, try to keep my neighborhood looking good. I don't want to have crap outside my house.
Look at your house, it's perfect.
Yeah, I love the gate.
That gate's neat, I like it.
That's great. But, and I agree with Robert, these are tough for us because, we have these ordinances, and these ordinances are based in, some rational thinking, right? Like if you put your building right up against that fence line, where's the drainage gonna come off of that thing? Is it gonna go into your neighbor's yard? Is it gonna?
It's all landscape back there. So it's about a 4-inch drop from the backyard where the building's gonna be start in the back. It's like a 4.5, 5-inch slope to the front of the house. And then once it hits the gate, the fence line, it's a complete slope down to the front sidewalk. So none of my water is going to my neighbors.
And you're the exception to the rule, probably.
Yes.
Most people are just gonna slap something together and they're not gonna think about that kind of stuff. So when we're looking at these projects, we gotta look at what you're doing and see if it can be a model for us to change our ordinance and make the ordinance work for what's actually happening in the community. We've done that with the sheds, we've done that with some of these other projects where just the code doesn't make sense anymore, or maybe we can modify it so it fits what's actually happening in the community. So I like the project. I think it's, to give you that flexibility to build something like this, I think makes sense. But I think we need to do it on a broader scale. I think we can't just let you do it, because I think over in your neighborhood, somebody complained about a carport that was built this way, and it had to be dismantled and taken down because it didn't meet the code. So I don't have a problem approving this project so long as we're moving forward with an ordinance change.
And then another thing too on your guys' code, I mean, we're not putting like a barn corrugated building. This is actually a pre-engineered building. They sell it when you leave out of town here, but I'm actually buying through our company so that I get a little bit better deal. So like I said, it's not like it's going to be a barn. After a while, it's going to look all rusty looking. I mean, I applied for the use permit because I'm planning on keeping this thing up. So if it looks like crap, you guys need to tell me. I'll take it down. It's not a.
Your house is testimony to what you're gonna be doing.
And again, I want to keep in mind, we're still in the middle of the public hearing, so if the council, like I said, at some point I can close the public hearing at an appropriate time. If we feel all questions have been answered, we'll take it back to the council.
Well, and I also want to commend the planning commission too, because again, this is one of those situations where they probably want to approve this thing, but they are looking at the big picture. How if they approve this, what's going to happen to everybody else that comes before the planning commission that may not have the quality of project that you have, or may not have put the thought into it that you have. So I think it's important that when they recognize this, they kick it up to the council. They do what they need to do, they send it up to the council, and that gives us an opportunity to take a look at it and make recommendations whether we need to change the ordinance or tweak things to make this kind of stuff work. So, thank you.
She made the comment that my trailer's out here. It's back at home.
Okay.
I just brought it over here for the short time because I thought I was going to get this building's going to go a lot quicker than I anticipated, so it didn't.
So no worries.
What?
Is there anybody else that has any questions for Mr. Reese before I ask anybody else if they'd like to speak at this public hearing? Thank you, Mr. Reese.
Thank-
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak at this public hearing? No? Okay, then seeing none, I'd like to take it back to council for any final comments. And again, if you would like to reverse the planning commission's decision, I do need a motion.
You can also approve as is, apply any other conditions. It's at your full discretion for this project, the use permit and the variance.
I don't have a problem with this project, and I'd approve it with not acknowledging that the planning commission did nothing wrong. They did their jobs. And due to the circumstances in this particular situation, I think it's a model like you said. And I would suggest that we do a modification in our ordinances to accommodate this type of a situation. And so it doesn't handcuff our planning commission. So I would approve it.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I will second it based on the Mayor Pro Tem Al's comments and the condition that we're gonna review the ordinance.
Okay. Jamie, do you have a good grasp on that?
So you're reversing the planning commission's decision and approving the project?
Yes, but also,
And also directing staff to come back with a new
With a
ordinance?
modified.
correct.
Right.
You're going ahead and moving forward with actions 1 through 6 as well so we can file the exemption for
Right,
CEQA and get all
right.
that stuff done as well.
So motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? I just have one point of discussion. I'm almost wondering, because we're talking about using that as a model, and directing it back to staff to look at this, I'm wondering if what you have already with this specific situation, if you can begin the crafting process.
So
for
a
an
couple
ordinance
of things that I've noticed, or that I noted that we would want to consider is that this is an engineered structure. So it's not a homemade structure, it is an engineered structure. And then the point of the storm runoff.
Right.
You know, confirming that that's staying on that property. Those are two things that I noted that, you know, we definitely would want to make sure.
Those are valid points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I say, I mean, if you can start on something soon, and my thought is that this seems to be such a complete plan, you know, versus waiting for Mr. East to finish this project.
Yeah.
You might begin to start working on it, you know, sooner rather than later.
I also think the fact that it's, you know, not 15 feet tall, the fact that it's removable, and that, you know, there's some condition that it's gonna be maintained in a condition that, you know, is acceptable. I don't think it's gonna be an issue here, but we have to write the ordinance and make the adjustments for the people that aren't gonna maintain them, so.
Is there any further discussion on the aforementioned motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying no. Motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention. Council communications, just in the nick of time. Councilmember Crumick.
I had a few things. So, the first thing, I think, thank the representative from Josh Harder's office for showing up. I think it's interesting that his handling of a bunch of rodents is considered a great move politically. And then the second thing about,
In the ag community, really. is.
well, okay, well,
Trust me.
I guess I don't
really
understand it enough, but, and then as far as the student debt for doctors, I think that's another thing that Councilman Alves touched on, is that you can't just forgive debt. It's a myth, and, because they borrowed that money probably from the government via taxpayer dollars, and if we are to forgive that, then they're not paying back what they borrowed from the taxpayers, and so it's a fallacy that it's something that's, I mean, it sounds good, it sounds great, free stuff, you know, but there's no such thing as anything free. The next thing, the sales tax measure, that's an interesting one. You know, it's tough because it's, where does it end? I always go with these taxes, you know, if we raise a half cent here, then in 5 years, and it's just gonna go on and on and on. I think that we really need to focus on other ways to balance the budget, keep the money where we want it in public safety, which is very important. So I'm going to be interested to see how that all plays out. For the rest of this year, we've got a number of more meetings, and I do want to open the discussion about the city's unfunded liability. I've been looking into this a little bit, and it looks like the city has a $1.5 million roughly unfunded liability, and that goes to, how much of that is CalPERS? Are the police in CalPERS?
That's all CalPERS.
It's all CalPERS?
Correct.
So I've been looking at this, and it seems like, we have to think about cutting costs. It bothers me that we have this. It's like the ultimate government kick the can down the road, where, especially in California, where now the unfunded liabilities in the state of California are like well over $1 trillion. And I don't want to be a city or a city council person that doesn't address that, because I think in a small part, every little city makes up the state and how we handle our finances. And I know we're all very fiscally conservative here, but we need to look at that. And the only way, you can only pay for what you can pay for. And I know in government that doesn't seem to be the case, but I'd like us to look a little bit about the unfunded liability and what we're going to do about that. I know, Tammy, you said you've contracted somebody to help us understand that. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've obtained some software that will assist us in understanding better our unfunded liability, and then give us the ability to look at ways to pay it off, and, if we make changes, what that would mean to that unfunded liability.
Okay. I looked up, there's a community called Loyalton, California, and they tried to opt out of CalPERS and get out of it, and because it was too expensive. And as a city, they felt that was their best decision. However, CalPERS will hit you with these termination fees, which you can't pay anyways. Stockton faced the same thing when they went bankrupt in 2012. But this one town had to cut their CalPERS pension contributions. And I know nobody likes to talk about that, but I think Mayor Swift made a good point. He said, we're looking ahead. A lot of these decisions are about looking ahead. They're about the next 20, 30 years. So this, to me, is one of those things we need to talk about. We're planning for the future. It's just going to come back and back and back and back. So I'm not going to drag on, but I would like to open that conversation and start looking at that unfunded liability. It's a debt we have that we currently can't pay. That's a problem. So I'd like to find ways to do that and look at that.
So, and just as a note too, we have, the last couple of years, when we've had surplus from our budget versus our actual, we've set aside, we currently have like $200,000, that is.
200 to go to the 1.5?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's so hard to talk about is because you're talking about everybody's money. You're talking about every city employee in this room. And I think that's exactly why this type of government exists, where city council members are not they're employees, but they're kind of on the outside looking in. And this is the only position where you could make a determination like that. But I think we have to do what we have to do. And taxing everybody more and more and more and more and more and more is not the answer. We've got to find other ways. And so I wanted to just bring that up, and I'd like to keep that conversation going. That's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Crumick, thank you very much. Councilmember Legero.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Merkin.
Just a couple of brief comments here. You had to ask what the student loans are for a doctor. I have a cousin that just graduated from medical school at Drexel University, and he's looking at $200,000 in debt to begin with. And he's still doing his residency. So it's a lot. Now, how you can forgive that, I have no clue. I'd like to thank Tammy for the work she did at COG in arguing the city's side there. Escalon gets to keep their 75% of the LTF, while other cities are gradually losing theirs. And we can continue to use our LTF to fix our roads.
Very good.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. That's a big win.
Yay!
It's a big win.
And just a question, do we know when they're going to stripe Highway 120?
I actually called Joe, our representative for Caltrans, and he doesn't know. He's gotta call the department that does the striping and find out. He hopes within the next week.
I'll tell you,
So
the
we
last,
don't know.
the last weekend was a zoo out here
It's ridiculous.
on Highway 120 going eastbound, because there were people that assumed that that center lane was a passing lane, and they're going. So, yeah, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Thank you, Councilmember Merkin. Mayor Pro Tem Alves.
Just, the fencing on the park. What are we gonna do? We're gonna do both backstops and the sides on each side?
Everything, but basically the perimeter of the whole park. Everything inside that surrounds the baseball fields will be
Will be
replaced.
brand new. Next thing you do is put up some signs, not to be leaning into and stretching them out.
You know, I had the rec commission, say that we need to put signs up about not hitting balls against the fence.
Good idea.
Cause that's probably
part of
the larger issue is hitting the balls against the
Whatever,
fence.
we just need to be a little more cognizant of our environment out there and let people know that if you want a nice area, take care of it. You know, what impressed me this evening with this gentleman here was, yeah, he's putting this metal building up, and people think, whatever. The point is, look at his house. It tells you a lot about the guy. He's not a slob, does a nice thing, and it just felt right. Anyway, back to Peter. Peter, I totally agree with what you said this evening in terms of how that we find funding mechanisms to continue doing business as a city government. The problem is, it's a sensitive area because there are a lot of people who are affected by that fund. And to find something or even suggest to not have it is very touchy ground. So I agree with you, the dialogue should be constant in ways to generate other revenues to help offset the burden of that fund, because it's what's killing cities. Every city that's small that grows, the reason they have to grow is because they need more money, and they need more money to pay the cost of the services. It's that simple.
Because of the growth.
That's well, not because of the growth. The growth is part of the problem, and it's also part of the solution. It's a temporary fix, but down the road, you're gonna pay more because now you've created a bigger problem. So there's no easy answers for any of this stuff. But if we all kind of put our heads together, maybe by some miracle, we can come up with a funding solution to some of these problems. I mean, I struggled with the parking over here to try to get a little extra money there, some other ideas. I mean, we're looking at some possibility of a solar plant. Hopefully we can pull something off there. We just have to get out and be a little more creative in a small community. We don't have the resources other communities have. But the critical thing is, and this is very critical, is that we do keep it up in front. We're always talking about it, because you're right. Too much, it gets past us and we forget about it. Meanwhile, we're talking about tax increases, we're talking about this, and we're talking about that. They're not comfortable situations to be in, but we've got to work together to find a way to keep the ship floating. So, thank you for that. I think it was a great idea to bring that up. And thank you everybody this evening for indulging this gentleman in his building. I think that was the right thing to do. Thank you, I'm done.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Alves. Yeah, I'm going to echo the same thing, Councilmember Crumberg. I think it's, it's a very important issue, and I know that, I think this last year's budget, I think I saw, Tammy, a projection over the next couple of years as to what our burden might be. Because I know that statewide, according to the League of California Cities, it's going to be peaking, I think, this next year. And I think our burden of what we're going to be owing is going to be a lot. But I think it's not, if I recall from last June, it's not insurmountable.
Correct.
Yeah, and we're a lot luckier.
Which is why we started that reserve.
Yeah, and so we're a lot luckier than a lot of towns, because a lot of these towns, they really are a sinking ship, and they're gonna be hit hard this next year. But I think that information's there in this last year's budget. But yeah, nevertheless, I think you're right. You just always gotta stay vigilant on something like this, because this is some pretty serious stuff. Katie, right? Okay, I'm gonna thank you again for coming tonight. I understand the concept behind, again, those doctors, like Councilmember Bergen said, they end up with a couple $100,000 in debt. They're not gonna be going to the valley. They're not going to be going to some of your areas, not just here, but even down south, Mendota, Balico, stuff like that. They'll never pay their debt off that way. So I understand whether we agree with it or not. I understand the concept behind it. We'll forgive your debt. We'll get a better caliber of doctor in an area like this, because as of right now, your best and the brightest, they've got to go to where the money's at to pay their bills, you know? Yeah, okay. And a couple other things. Yes, we do have the Highland Games next weekend. Okay, Hogan Field all weekend long. Should be a lot of fun. This weekend, or this last weekend, we had Sunday in the Park. It's a chamber event. We had pumpkin carving, kids contest. It was a great time. Friday, I don't know if you had a chance to see the homecoming parade. And you know what I get a lot at these events? I get a lot of these people saying, wow, what a great town, what a great close-knit town. We're so special to have these small town events. And I think that whatever we do, we just have got to keep in mind, you look towards the future, infrastructure, efficiencies, keeping our budget afloat. But no matter what we do, we've always got to keep in mind of what the soul of this town is. And the soul of this town, you will see it. And I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again, is the community, the close-knitness. If you want to see an example of the soul, again, this last weekend, you had 2 great events. You're going to have more coming up. That's the thing that we need to protect at all costs, no matter what we do. And that's why we need looking forward to the future. I think we can protect that going years into the future, as long as we make a lot of the right moves that hopefully we're trying to make now, not just with us, but with the Planning Commission and everybody else involved, and everybody coming here tonight to give us their input. So I think that's the direction that we're heading in. Just try to keep the soul of this community going as long as we can. I think we can do it for a long time. Mayor Pro Tem Alves, you had something?
In terms of the doctor situation with these, want to forgive their loans, rather than forgiving their loans, why don't we have your congressman come up with the idea to give them a tax credit annually for maybe the first 5 years? Instead of having them dismiss their debt, give them a tax credit, a percentage every year. That way they stay here until at least they're gonna stay long enough to get that thing wiped out. But to wipe out the debt, I just don't see that. But I do think there is some good ways to accomplish what we're trying to do by giving them incentive, and that is one, maybe a tax credit.
It might be more palatable in terms of getting it passed, too.
Oh, yeah, well, it's a
Yeah.
lot more palatable, because you think about how many people out there want to get their loans taken care of.
You give them more money, or if they're gonna move to the Bay Area, they're gonna have more money, they're gonna move out there.
Well, they've done that before, years ago with teachers and teaching, where they would incentivize them going into, inner cities and stuff like that. And it's been a pretty good program, but there are strings attached in the sense that you need to be here for X amount of years. And you can't just get there for a couple of years till your loans are forgiven and then you're vamonos, so. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I'll declare this meeting adjourned.